Hello and welcome to the Wisp News Desk with me, Chris Stafford, alongside Nancy Gillen. It is March the 9th and this is season 4, episode 10, by the way. And Nancy, the news, both within sport and beyond, is all about, obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I guess, you're getting stories from a different angle in Europe. What's sort of dominating the news from your perspective in London?
Yeah, I think very much the same. I think a lot of, within sport anyway, a lot of, the stories about, I think one of the biggest things is Roman Abramovich. He's the owner of Chelsea here, and he's Russian, and he's, I think they're threatened to freeze his assets, including the club, and then he's selling the club. And in women's sport, there's the whole domino effect of what does that mean for the women's team. And then, of course, the stories of the Ukrainian athletes. I think particularly there's been quite a few about some of the tennis players, some of which will be playing at Indian Wells this week. Just within sport, the kind of big story within just the news in general is also kind of the biggest story within sport as well.
What will happen to Chelsea women's team then? Are they under the same ownership?
Yeah, they are. Abramovich, Chelsea as a whole put a lot of money into the women's team. So for me, I don't think anything will change. Really, I don't think they're going to suffer because it's changing ownership. I think whoever takes over the club will also have a very large amount of money. I think Abramovich is selling the club as a whole for like £3 to £4 billion. And even if the new owner just doesn't care about women's football, I think it would be a ridiculously bad for PR to kind of sink one of the most successful teams going and one of the most popular teams going. So for me, I can't really see much of a difference. But obviously I could be wrong. You never really know with these things, but yeah, there is just kind of that potential consequence, I think, knock-on consequence for the women's team.
And isn't there some rumour floating around today about potential American owners bidding for that club?
Yeah, I did see that. I saw also a British billionaire as well was also interested. But yeah, I saw the story about the American owners as well, which would be interesting. I think you've already got Arsenal and Liverpool already owned or part owned by Americans. Both with quite differing women's teams. Like obviously the Arsenal women's team is very successful. So I don't know if obviously women's football is so big in America that I don't know if maybe an American owner would be more likely to want to invest in the women's team. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happened if that was the case.
All right. Well, we'll follow that. Keep you posted here at Wisp Sports. Don't forget to check us online at wispsports.com. Now, we're going to lead actually with Ukraine. Our top story today is about the Ukrainian canoeist who told the story of how she had to rescue her daughter from the war zone. She was in a training camp in Poland, wasn't she, for canoe slalom? Nancy, and she had to go home to rescue both her daughter, her husband, and her parents.
Yeah, it was, I think, quite amazing because she wasn't actually in Ukraine at the time. So when she woke up and heard that her country, Ukraine, was under attack from Russia, and she was in Poland, but her 5-year-old daughter, her husband, and her parents were still in Ukraine. So she decided she wanted to go back into Ukraine. And managed to travel to, I think it's Lviv, a Ukrainian city, which is only 70 kilometers from the Polish border, and met her husband, her daughter, and her mother there. And then they had to go all the way back to Poland again to reach safety. So they slept at the railway station for 24 hours and then I think eventually got a train back. But yeah, I think stories like that just kind of, obviously, within our little world of sport, I think it just makes you realize that it can, impact anyone. It's just a normal athlete who's training and actually has her life completely changed upside down by what's happened. And I mean, thank God, she's safe and her family is safe as well. I think it's just incredible. I think you hear stories about, these athletes that are still competing. I know there were the tennis players at the tournament taking place last week, and they're still competing, and their lives are just in complete turmoil, and they must be so anxious about their family and friends back home that it's absolutely incredible that they're still kind of training and competing.
Yeah, and I think that must be extraordinary mental fortitude to be able to concentrate on playing right now, or even training with what's going on. But we should mention that the story about the canoeist that comes from the International Canoeing Federation, and they've set up a GoFundMe account, Nancy, to raise money for Ukrainian athletes, coaches, and their families that are caught up in the war. And if you want to follow the link on our website at wissports.com, just go to the Listen tab and drop down to the Wiss Sports desk, and there you'll find the show notes, and there'll be a link in there to this story where you'll be able to donate if you are a canoeist, or you follow the sport, or you really want to support this canoeist and others that are obviously being threatened by the war, these Ukrainian athletes. You can do so by following the link on our website. So, Nancy, our next story comes from actually somebody who's a well-known Ukrainian-born Paralympian. She's currently in Beijing for the Paralympic Games, and I'm sure you've been following her story. We've had her as a guest on one of our shows in the past, and she was a victim of Chernobyl, if you remember the Chernobyl disaster some years ago. She has, talk about mental fortitude, Nancy, that's Oksana Masters. I'm sure you've been following her at the Paralympics.
Yeah, and she has been successful there, winning a gold and a silver medal already. But yeah, she like you said, born in Ukraine and then was adopted by an American woman aged 7. But yeah, she wrote an Instagram post saying that she almost felt guilty even after winning those medals, saying she feels selfish, helpless and guilty for competing in Beijing when her home country is at war. And yeah, I thought she said, go back to the resilience as well. She says, my mum always said my Ukrainian heart made me resilient. It made me a fighter. So I think some insight into how she's kind of managing to compete. And she's also asked people to donate money to a charity, which is the No Child Forgotten charity, which supports children living with physical disabilities as well. So yeah, it's obviously a very emotional time for her.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, first of all, on her winning the gold. Oksana, you are an amazing, amazing athlete, but this again highlights the tragedy that's unfolding with these athletes who have links to Ukraine. So anyway, that story you can find a link to on our website at wissports.com, because we want to hopefully, see some results, some more results of the Paralympics, as we're still right in the middle of those games. But it's been very overshadowed, hasn't it, Nancy, by the war in Ukraine. The coverage of the Paralympics, I think, on both sides of the pond has been overshadowed. Yeah,
it has. It's quite hard to judge here because winter sports aren't that popular, but definitely compared to, the stuff with the Winter Olympics. And I felt I was kind of more engaged in that and more aware of what was happening. And that was before what happened with Ukraine and Russia. I feel sorry for the athletes. It's kind of very unfair that they've worked so hard for this, and it's kind of being, obviously there's a lot, there's life is more important than sport, but for the athletes, I think not to get their moment in kind of, with all the attention of the world on them is a bit of a shame. I feel bad, but I haven't really watched too much of it. But I am trying to keep abreast as much as I possibly can. So yeah, hopefully in the coming weeks as well, I'll be able to watch a bit more. And there's another story, of course, that's been dominating
the women's sports news network, if you like, worldwide, and that's of the WNBA American basketball player Brittney Griner. Now, this is well, as I said earlier, Nancy, you and I were talking before we started recording. I think she's definitely going to be used as a pawn, political pawn, because of the drug charges that she's facing now in Russia. And the prospects don't look very good for her if she's found guilty and charged, found guilty, and she has to serve time in Russia during the time of a war.
Yeah, it's all kind of very unfortunate for her, I think. And yeah, the options don't really look great either. It's, it's kind of got an added meaning because of what's happened with Russia and Ukraine. And you do have to ask, probably would it have happened if Russia and Ukraine, that whole situation wasn't happening? It seems kind of too coincidental. But yeah, I just hope that kind of the situation can resolve itself as much as possible, because while she did make a mistake, it would be, and I feel very sorry for her, and it's obviously going to be quite a horrible situation for her. And she's, a very talented basketball player, and just, it must be quite hard, like mentally and physically, to be where she is right now. So I'm hoping the WNBA and everyone involved can kind of resolve her situation as soon as possible. Just
remind everybody what she was charged with, Nancy, because this had happened already a week or two, maybe more, before we actually heard that she had been detained.
Yeah, so she was flying home. So she plays, I think in the off season, she plays in Russia. So she was flying back to the US, and when she went through the security at the airport, they found like a vape kind of thing. I can't quite remember what they're called, with hashish oil in. So she was held on drug charges, and faces up to 10 years in a Russian prison. But yeah, like you said, it was kind of that information was held back a bit. I think when I read it, it had happened a couple of weeks before, and Russia had only kind of released the information, which again is obviously opportune timing given the wider international situation. So yeah, I think a very scary situation and very serious charges that she could face. So yeah.
And her club is Phoenix Mercury Club, which of course is a very successful club here in the US. So we will keep you appraised of that story as it continues to unfold, and wish her the very, very best of luck in a very difficult situation, as you said, Nancy. Well, we're going to move on now to some good news in terms of US women's soccer, because they finally settled who is going to be the president of US soccer now. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Cindy Cone, she's been re-elected as the US soccer president. We talked about her only a week or two ago because she played quite a key role in reaching a settlement with the women's national team players over their equal pay dispute. And so Cone had already been president for a short period of time because she'd replaced Carlos Cordero, who had stepped down, even resigned a few years ago because of the whole kind of equal pay settlement. He made some very offensive comments, in my opinion, about the female players, and then subsequently resigned. So Cone stepped in, but then actually Cordero challenged her for the position, so he re-ran as well. And fortunately, in my opinion, Cone won the election. She got 52.9% of the weighted vote from the US Soccer Federation's National Council. And she will now be in that position for 4 years, so right up until 2026. So, yeah, I think it's really great. I mean, obviously, I think she hasn't been president for that long, but she's already kind of done something incredibly significant by reaching that equal pay settlement with the national team. But I was I think it said it was in this ESPN story, it said it was the closest final ballot in US soccer history, which is slightly dispiriting just because Cordero had said previously. But potentially what I kind of hope is that Cordero, because he was, this kind of old guard. Maybe he had some favours to call with people who felt obliged to vote for him. And now it doesn't matter because Cone's now president and we can kind of move on and get rid of that aspect within US soccer. So, yeah, good luck to her. I really hope she kind of continues to be positive, have a positive impact in her role.
Yeah, absolutely. Just clear the air a little bit in US women's soccer for sure. All right, we're going to move on to tennis now. We've covered tennis regularly. I think every week we have tennis stories, don't we, Nancy, from one part of the world or the other. And Ash Barty, of course, who won the Australian Open, she made news again, but because she felt she had to pull out of Indian Wells, which is happening this week, and the Miami Open, wasn't quite ready and hadn't quite recovered from the Australian Open, is what I read.
Yeah, so she, like you said, has pulled out of the tournament. Basically citing kind of a lack of, maybe not a lack of fitness, but just a lack of kind of competition readiness. I think, to be fair, I think Barty seems to be like a perfectionist. Like, it seems like every tournament she plays in, she obviously everyone plays to win, but she plays like legitimately to win. And I suppose kind of winning the Australian Open, she was very impressive there, but it's obviously kind of taken a bit out of her. So she said that her body hasn't recovered the way she'd hoped after the Australian Open, and she hasn't been able to adequately prepare for Indian Wells and the Miami Open. So yeah, she's withdrawn from both events. I imagine probably the next big event we'll see will probably be the French Open in a couple of months, because yes. Indian Wells is kind of the go-between between the Australian Open and the French Open.
Yes.
Yeah, and then also the second seed, I don't know if you saw, Chris, but Barbara Krejcikova has also withdrawn. So that's the top two seeds gone from the tournament. Which, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say like kind of blows the competition wide open, because I think in women's tennis, you never really get who you expect to win. Or kind of the top seeds aren't always guaranteed to win. So I still think it was always anyone's game. But yeah, interesting that the two top seeds have withdrawn from the competition.
Yeah. All right. We'll be following that for you right here on the Wisp News Desk. Well, Nancy, our next story, well, we've got two stories, one after the other, kind of both sides of a coin here, really, when it comes to participation in women's sports and girls being retained. We know that girls can lose interest in sport, participating in sport. They talk about a lack of confidence, and, when they're in their middle school years and the fear of being judged and so on. And that seems to be the dropout period, doesn't it? But there's a new research has become available that was taken in the UK on this very topic, wasn't there?
Yeah, so it's a study by Women in Sport, and they kind of polled more than 4,000 teenagers about, I think, just participating in sport. And they found that 43% of girls felt they were sporty at primary school, but they no longer saw themselves that way. And kind of extrapolating that data, that would equate to 1.3 million girls across the UK, which is obviously an incredibly high number. And they said there were a number of factors for this. So 68% said that a fear of feeling judged prevented them from taking part, while 61% said they lacked confidence, and just under half said they were too busy with schoolwork to carry on with sport. And yeah, I think they when comparing this with boys as well, the percentage of girls that wouldn't call themselves sporty anymore was a lot higher. Yeah, so it's obviously kind of very dispiriting study. And I don't think it's anything that's particularly new either. I think when I was younger, it's pretty much the same, like girls at primary school, like a lot of people played sport. And then, when you got to secondary school, it kind of dropped off massively. So I suppose that's quite sad in itself as well, that this has been quite a long-term problem. And it hasn't really changed that much. So yeah, I think obviously these polls are good because we kind of know, the numbers there and kind of the reasons behind it. But I think we need to kind of start trying to do something about it as well.
One of the things we've talked about here is about the myth around taking part in sport when you're having your period. And I was pretty shocked at the statistics there, Nancy, that 8 in 10 girls, they avoided taking part in sport when they're on their period.
Yeah, I mean, but that's really, really high.
Yeah.
And I think, 7, was it? Yeah, they used to be, they avoided taking part in sport when on their period. And then there's more as well saying again that this is higher than those that have never been sporty. So there's a prevalence within girls that play sport, just kind of completely avoiding it when on their period, which, like we've spoken a lot about how it is still possible. And that's kind of, I suppose, a bit of a stigma as well, which again is something that needs to end.
Because they talk about, avoiding the reasons why they were avoiding sport when they were on the period, not least of all the pain, the cramps that you can get and the fatigue, but also that they're self-conscious about it. Yeah.
And I think particularly with things like swimming as well, I think swimming is where we went swimming at school. I think a lot of the girls would not swim if they were on their periods, even if it was possible. I think just because of that self-consciousness or like kind of fear, maybe that they'd like leak or something like that. And it is obviously a massive kind of barrier to participation in sport.
Now, I said we have both sides of the coin on this topic. We're going to go to Australia, down under, for the other side of this story. And they're reporting quite the contrary. There's been a huge growth of love for women's sports. As a result of this is coming out of as a result of new research down there, Nancy. So that's encouraging. What was happening in the UK is discouraging. So there's still a fight going on. There's a challenge there in the UK and in other countries to keep girls involved in sport. But in Australia, they seem to be doing a better job of it, getting girls and women interested.
Yeah, I think it's there's obviously a massive growing audience in that area of the world. Studies found that 2/3 of Australians, so 66%, have watched women's sport on TV, while 69% have watched more since the start of the pandemic. And there's also quite a large proportion of men as well, 72% watching women's sport. So it's not even necessarily just limited to women watching women's sport. I think this is what's interesting. They also found that 2 in 5 viewers of women's sport say they've been inspired or considered playing the sports themselves after watching on TV. So it's that kind of, I suppose it's a bit of a cycle in that you need, if you've got women on TV playing sport, you can then inspire kind of the younger generation who watch it and want to do it too. So there's definitely links there for sure. And it's great to see in Australia that they've got such positive figures.
Well, they've got something to get excited about right now with the Women's World Cup happening in down under in New Zealand, and I think that's generated a lot of audience growth, especially amongst the men too, who enjoy watching women's cricket. So we're going to turn to that story now because, as a Brit, we're not doing too well, are we? The English team are not faring too well in this World Cup now, that with the 2 games that they've played already. I think they play South Africa next. But you've got an update on that, Nancy.
Yeah, so like you said, unfortunately, it's not been great for England so far. So they lost to Australia in their opening match. But I think that was kind of to be expected. I mean, Australia had taken the Ashes just a couple of weeks ago, so they were kind of obviously shown they were the superior team, and I think they're widely considered as the favourites to win the whole tournament. But then England went on to lose against the West Indies, which is the first time they've lost to the West Indies in the history of the World Cup. So a bit more of a shocking result there. So they've lost both of their opening matches because it's kind of a round robin tournament between 8 teams. England can still advance, but obviously it's just massively reduced the margin for error. So I don't really think they can be losing much more, obviously starting with South Africa on Monday. But yeah, it's been, I think the West Indies, I was, kind of looking at all the results that have been so far. I mean, Australia have won both their matches, but the West Indies have too, which is against England and New Zealand, who obviously are the hosts. So maybe dark horses there, West Indies.
Quite possibly. But we should beat South Africa, she said confidently.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose South Africa have won their first game. They beat Bangladesh, so potentially maybe slightly higher on confidence than England. But yeah, you're right. I'd really hope that England will start kind of getting some victories on the board.
Yeah, well, good luck to them, because we know they can win. We won the World Cup a few years ago when we beat India in that thrilling finale at Lord's. So let's hope we can pick up some momentum again in New Zealand. All right, we're going to go back to basketball now. You've got a WNBA story for us, Nancy, about a chartered flight scandal. What's that?
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting one. This is a story that came from Sports Illustrated, and it's kind of a weird story of when I think almost some of the rules in place to make sure that women's sport is growing sustainably kind of can maybe not backfire, but kind of limits the competition. So New York Liberty, one of the teams that plays in the WNBA, Sports Illustrated found that they were initially fined $1 million. This was then reduced to $500,000, but still a league record fine, for chartering some flights for their players. So I think they chartered like a holiday somewhere in California, but they also chartered, I think, to all the away matches in the second half of the season. And then there was also kind of a competition happening in Las Vegas that they chartered a flight for a number of their players. But this is actually, you're not allowed it within the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. You're not actually allowed to charter flights, hence the reason that they got fined for it. So essentially, by giving their players kind of better conditions, they were punished, essentially. So the reason behind it is, the rationale behind it is that they can't, it gives, if a team charters flights, because not all teams can afford to charter flights, then it gives the team, a team, an unfair advantage, essentially, because they've got more money. And they've said that, the only way to do this would be to get a sponsor on board who would pay for every team to have chartered flights. But then I think New York Liberty hit back and said that they had apparently come up with a scheme for this, an initiative for this, a feasible way for every team to have chartered flights. And a lot of the other owners kind of put this to the other owners of the other teams, and apparently it lacked majority support. So some owners were worried that players would get used to it, so there'd be no going back, and others wondered whether players might just prefer a salary hike instead. So it's a very interesting story there. I think it attracted a bit of comment. I think Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, particularly picked out that bit about the owners of other teams rejecting the idea of making charter flights the default travel option, and kind of said something along the lines of like, do you want to make progress or not? Quite an interesting one there. And like I said, I think just an example of how, the rules are in there for good, I think, to essentially ensure equality and make sure that no one can come in and just buy success. But at the same time, it's then forcing some players to, have kind of worse conditions by having to get economy flights. And I think when you remember how tall some of these basketball players are as well, I think they'd much prefer to have flights where they can stretch out and stuff like that. So yes, a little bit more creature comfort. Yeah, I can see that. But interesting story. Thank you for that. We're talking about equality. Our next story is about a deal that's aiming to achieve significant progress in gender equality, and that's with the WTA. Tell us about that. Yeah, so the WTA have announced a global title sponsor, which is Hologic. I think that's how you say it. I'm not personally, I think it's in the US. I'm not personally that familiar with the company, but it's a a medical technology company that focuses on improving women's health and reducing inequalities with healthcare. So it's actually the WTA's first title sponsor, I think, since it was something like 2010. So it's actually been quite a long time since there has been a proper title sponsor of the WTA tour. And it's not, the value of it hasn't been announced, but it's been called one of the it's one of the deals of the biggest deals in women's sport. And I think when you consider, the amount of money that's in tennis and how popular tennis is, it's understandable how it could be like that. I think as well, it comes in quite a significant time for the WTA, because they of course suspended all their tournaments in China because of the Peng Shuai situation, which would have had a very kind of heavy financial impact on the organization. So to get that sponsorship deal in, I think it was quite significant for them. And yeah, I mean, I like the sound of the company. Like I said, I don't know too much about it, but it sounds quite, in line with, gender equality. And we've spoken a lot about how women are kind of ignored in terms of like sports medicine and sports science and all of that. And it sounds like this company is doing some stuff to kind of improve that area of not just sport, but kind of society as a whole. So yeah, it seems like quite an exciting partnership.
Yeah, it certainly does. All right, our final story is about a retirement in netball. And, of course, we know that netball is very much a Commonwealth country game. But I did report some time ago, Nancy, that it was the fastest growing women's team sport in the world. And it certainly has got that kind of momentum to it. And it's produced stars, too, hasn't it? And one of them is the England Netball captain who's just announced her retirement. And we know why now.
Yeah, so Serena Guthrie, she has announced that she's pregnant with her first child and has subsequently retired from domestic and international netball. But like you said, I think Guthrie's kind of one of these stars that's come out of the rise of netball, and she's played in England. I think she's won 4 Super League titles over here, but she's also played in New Zealand and Australia. Of course, netball being massively popular in Australia. And yeah, she was a real standout player over there. For England as well, she's an England legend. So she was part of the team that won the gold medal at the 2018 Commonwealth Games in quite dramatic circumstances against Australia. And then also earned a bronze medal as well at the 2019 World Cup, which was held in England. She's had an incredibly successful career, has been given an MBE for her achievements as well. And yeah, just obviously sad to see her go, but I think she's left a massive legacy for netball players that are coming through underneath her.
Yeah, for sure. I bet she'll still be around the court as she raises that child too. Players never go too far from the court, do they? Even when they've retired. Yeah,
and I imagine she'll turn to coaching or something like that. I can, very easily see her doing something like that.
Well, congratulations to her and her partner Bob. Well, finally, this week, Nancy, we're coming to the end of the World Cup skiing season. As you know, we've just got 2 races left before it wraps up for 2022, at least 21-22 season. And this past weekend, the girls were racing for the second weekend, running in Switzerland, in Lenzerheide this time. And there was a new winner in the Super G. That was the French girl, Romane Moreldelli, and that was her first career victory. And she won the Super G ahead of Michaela Schifrin, who was skiing on much better form. She really lost her form during the Olympics. She found her groove again in Switzerland, and that was her 107th podium for her. And in third place was the Swiss skier Lara Gutbarami. That was her 29th Super G podium. But the winner for the World Cup Super G title now, that's gone to Federica Brignoni, the Italian skier, because nobody could beat her out of those 3. She was the clear winner, so she's claimed that title for this season. And in the giant slalom, the French had it their way as well, because Tessa Wardley won that, and that was her 16th giant slalom victory. And Federica Brignoni was on great form in that as well. She finished second. and that was her 47th World Cup podium. And in third place, you'll remember Sarah Hector, the Swedish skier Nancy, who was on great form during the Beijing Olympic Games. Well, she claimed her 6th consecutive giant slalom podium finish in Lenzerheide. And this bodes well because this weekend they are in Åre in Sweden for a giant slalom and a Super G. So I can imagine she'll have all the support of her home crowd there. And it would be very interesting to see how she fares. Because sometimes they find the pressure of a home crowd. We've heard that before with the Swiss, with Tessa Wardley. Apparently, when she's in France, she really feels the pressure of a home crowd and doesn't always do as well. That's an interesting take because sometimes you think it would be that support that would they really push them over the line, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it seems like probably the majority of people like competing in front of home athletes, but I can understand the pressure aspect of it. I think, if that is something potentially maybe in the past, it's been something that's been an issue and then it's just kind of stuck around. So yeah, that is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, as I said, they're in Åre in Sweden this weekend, and then they come back and their final race was the World Cup finals in France, in Courchevel-Méribel. So that will wrap up the season. 2 more. Then what am I going to talk about, Nancy, after skiing's finished?
I don't know. I mean, what we've got, what have we got coming after? I'm sure there'll be a women's sporting event that we'll be able to discuss.
Oh, yeah, they will. No, I'm joking because I love my skiing. I'm going to miss it. I hate the off-season. I really do. I really hate the off-season. I can't wait to hear, in the spring, end of the spring, when the girls start going back down into the southern hemisphere and start training in New Zealand and Chile. It seems they've gone too long. But anyway, more of that next week. We'll be reporting from Åre in Sweden for that race. And we'll have more, of course, on the Paralympics. We'll have some updates, of course, from the World Cup cricket too. So stay tuned for that. We hope that England will do better. And in terms of football news, Nancy, what's Arsenal doing? Have you got any games you're going to?
Not this week, but in a couple of weeks we've got there's 2 matches at the Emirates, so like the main Arsenal stadium where the men normally play. One against Wolfsburg in the Champions League, and then Tottenham in the WSL, so that's about 2 weeks away. But otherwise Arsenal are doing pretty well. We got through to the next round of the FA Cup at the weekend by beating Liverpool. Or was that 2 weekends ago? Sorry, that was 2 weekends ago. I'm getting confused with my weekends. We beat Birmingham at the weekend in the WSL, so still kind of on track. Still still winning there, which is good news because we've got to hope that Chelsea slip up at some point and then we win the title. So yes, it's going pretty well at the moment. Good time to be an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, I did see that you won convincingly against Birmingham. And of course, over here, we're waiting to see the fixtures for NWSL season. So that's apparently a bit slow coming out. So we'll know hopefully by next week what that looks like, because we're right in pre-season. We're getting very close to the start of the NWSL season. So stay tuned for more of that here on the Wisp News Desk. Don't forget you can follow us on social media at Wisp Sports and post your comments, questions and suggestions. Show notes are at wispsports.com, and Nancy can be found at...
I'm at Nancy_Gillen on Twitter, and then Nancy Gillen_sport on Instagram. And all my articles can be found at Give Me Sport Women. Our Twitter handle is Give Me Sport W.
Well, there you have it. That's it for this week. We'll see you back here, same time, same place at the Wisp Sports Desk. Until then, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.